Welcome to the Modeling Empowered Narratives Podcast. I'm your co-host, Jordan Flowers.
I'm Trey Mosley.
I'm Jacob Hale.
And it's good to be back with my fellas, man. Good to see you guys, man.
It's been a long time coming.
Man, I haven't seen y'all in a while. Just want to do some check-ins, bro. Like I said, it's good to see you guys visually. Obviously, we talk every day, but it's not all the time that we get to able to connect in a way where we can see each other, since you guys want to be all the way across the world from me. But I just want to do some check-ins just to let the yeah, man. I'm back home. I'm back home now. But I just want to check-ins for our followers, our listeners, just to let them know what we've been doing, just in our personal lives and how we're feeling today. So I'll start with you, Trey. How you feeling today? What you been up to recently?
Recently, man, I got a new job. I work at the hospital now, and I just
work,
sleep, work out. I'm with the patients, and I like take care of patients and help like nurses and things like that get what they need to do. It's what I'm doing so I can get clinical hours to go back to school.
So
and personally, I just working out, man, and I go to sleep and I play the game. That's all I
he's
got.
A big game head. Big game head. How you feeling today, bro? Can you identify emotion for me today? How we feeling today?
Hey, I'm a little juiced. I had the day off, you know. I played some disc golf today. Was by the pool. We had ourselves a day.
So look at him doing some exciting things. So you, Hell, man, I'm gonna transition to Hell. How you doing today? What you been up to here recently?
Yeah, I'm doing well for sure. Man, I've been working so much, a lot of overtime. Obviously we talk about it, but yeah, man, I've been putting a very important, huge project that we're trying to get through and everything. So yeah, it's been taking up a lot of my time for sure. But on a normal time, you know, everything's been great. Same with Trey, man. You know, it's really fun going into the gym, you know, getting that workout in, especially after work and stuff. And, you know, just having the ability to have a little bit of fun, you know, explore a little bit, try new things, the usual, I would say.
Well, that's good to hear, bro. We all seem to be some gym heads, bro. So it's a good grounding process, definitely for all of us.
Yeah, what you been up to, athletes. Bro?
Oh man, I'm blessed. But first off, how I'm feeling today is I'm feeling very, very blessed, bro. Just glad to be back with you guys doing a podcast. Obviously, you know, this is something that I love to do in our free time, but just work really. I had a couple guest speaking experiences. I got a couple coming up as well. So doing a lot of working out, just doing some internal things within myself to improve self-worth, self-image, self-love, doing all the things that we talk about on this podcast. But just being intentional.
What do you talk about in your public speaking that you do?
So recently I had the chance to go back to my high school to speak to the incoming freshman class. Believe it or not, I had a lot of anxiety going in there to speak to a bunch of 15, 14-year-olds entering high school. I never had anxiety like that. Not before a game, not before anything. So, and to calm myself down, I had to listen to Kurt Franklin. He's able for about 10 minutes. For about 10 minutes before I can even get the courage to even walk into the school to even do this. But it went well, bro. They received me well. They asked a lot of good questions. And it's always a good thing to go back and speak to my high school. But we actually had a topic on growth mindset. So just how entering high school, understanding that we kind of figuring out ourselves. But, you know, it's a time to be curious and a time to be exploring a lot of things.
Yeah.
For sure. So that was kind of the topic of the day. But, yeah, I'm glad we got that over with because, you know, as I was rolling through it, I was good. But at the beginning, it was a little shaky. But we're here, though.
And sweat rolling down your back, all of that.
Sweat, yeah. But yeah, we got it done, and they like I said, they were very receptive of me. So, but I'm blessed though. But in saying that though, it's good to see you guys. Like I said, we haven't been able to do this in a while, but to all be here in a controlled environment where we're recording, and you know, now we're moving over to YouTube. Like this has been in the works for a while, has it not? How long have we been talking about this?
Trying to plan this, getting the online stuff set up, getting everybody managed, all of that.
Man,
for a
Yeah,
long
we've been
time.
talking about this probably since season one. Like literally, probably like a little bit before we even started recording. We were talking about trying to start filming and getting that all set up. So
But yeah,
Yeah, and
with
being
all
able
the
to be
moving
in the
pieces.
different locations. Yeah.
So with all the moving pieces,
yeah,
we weren't able to get everything aligned. But now that we're here, it's super important. Now we give people that visualization of, seeing the emotion, seeing us talk about these important things in a way where it's not just audio. I mean, the audio is the most important things, but to see us and how we engage in our conversation is another element of making this podcast a great thing. So, and speaking to that, before I even get into anything, I want to give a shout out to Marcus Polk for his contributions to the podcast. He's been shouting us out and he's been with us since day one, since season one, episode one. My dear friend that I went to school with, and he actually was helping in the contributions to help us move over to YouTube. So I want to give out to shout out to him for making that happen, and then I want to give a shout out to his brand, Mark Hicks. You could get at him for all your exclusive sneaker needs, including pre-orders on upcoming sneaker drops. You can follow his business page on Instagram at Mark Hicks Vault or his personal page at Marco Polo 23, and his link. The links for those pre-orders are in his bios, and he also has a couple vaults and a couple stores around the Midwest. So he does a lot of good shoe business and shoe reselling. But
Yeah,
on
he can
the
get you the good sneaks.
good sneaks, but on the topic of
Yeah.
sneaks, before we even move into anything, Trey, you're a fellow sneakerhead like myself. What you looking forward to? I need a shoe that you looking forward to dropping this year.
A shoe looking forward to dropping them lost and found red Jordan ones. Those I just like how they put the box together and they have like the different box like you'd find it in a pawn shop, and they have like a little pawn shop receipt that comes with it. And it's just the vintage look. I like how sneakers are starting to go back to the vintage look and the old ways that they presented shoes, and just trying to make everything different.
Absolutely, for me, it's got to be that those red and white 11s that's coming out in
Oh, don't
December.
wear your Christmas
Yeah,
Jordan
bro.
guy,
Yeah, you
man.
know what? And I haven't bought a shoe since that cool gray. So you gotta give me a little bit of slack.
That's
But
because you
before,
can't win them.
yeah,
You ain't got
okay.
it, man. That's what it
Speaking to
is.
that, Hill, and I want to get to you in a little bit. But speaking to that, since Trey is here giving me the blues, I need to make a public service announcement that Trey is using a bot. For
Uh,
all the sneaker guys out there, Trey is actively using a bot. I don't care what he says. I will accuse him of this. I don't care what evidence I do or do not have. I know for a fact that he's using one because there's no way you're winning all the shoes. There's no way. Like, and you could just go ahead and be honest with the viewers and listeners, bro. They're coming to get you regardless.
Nah, them they gonna stay away from me. They going after the big boys. I don't use a bot, man. You either got it or you don't, bro. I'm trying to tell you, that's all it
Yeah,
is.
you either got a bot or you don't. That's what he's saying, Hell. But I know Hell, my guy Hell is into a lot of things, outside of sneaker things. But Hell, anything you want to talk about in terms of something you're interested in? For you, you're a very
Something
particular
that you've
guy.
been doing recently, yeah.
yeah, I am a pretty particular guy. No, I mean, I really just like to try new things, see what works for me and everything. Like I was telling you, I definitely need to get back into reading and been eyeing some cool stuff that I wanted to look at and some fun stuff that I'd like to get read at some point. So, nothing too amazing as buying sneakers, but it's cool to me. So that's all that matters.
Oh yeah, bro.
Yeah.
No, he's big on saving money first off. So, he's definitely the person that's gonna tell you what to do and what not to do with your money. He's like the dad of the group and all of my group chats that
Oh,
we in with each
God.
other. Now he definitely is, and to speak to that, also I want to say something to Hell is that he also adopted the city of St. Louis, which is a cardinal sin, 'cause since he's from Chicago. So I need him on the spot to pick what city are you claiming, Chicago or St. Louis? Because you can't claim both. I
You
can't.
know
I
where
can't
he
let you do
claiming.
that.
You know where he claiming. It's where he
I
Hold
lives.
can't. I
on.
can't let him claim
So,
both.
so, so the rule is that you get two, and the criteria for two is you get your hometown for sure. You automatically get your hometown, right?
Right. Right.
And then Your second one is either where you start as a young adult or where you build your family at. But you get two. That's the rule is two. So
Right.
St. Louis is building in the two right now.
So
But of
so
course, I'm
so
always going to support Chicago.
one city, you got to claim it. I heard everything you said. I need you to claim. If it was the last city on earth and you had to pick where to live the rest of your days at, is it St. Louis or Chicago?
Damn.
So you got to think about this.
Is
You
it
might
no,
not be
no,
allowed
okay,
within the
no.
city.
So here's the
The thinking
issue.
is all you needed to know.
The issue is the easy answer is Chicago, but man, that's just
Now he has a butt. So
I mean,
so,
the
I mean, the
Moses
Bears
at
are doing
Wheelhouse
too
are
well. You know, there ain't a lot
undefeated.
to root for right now in that city.
wow. See, you
You
see
got the
how
Blues,
I
always
can't
good.
I
Cardinals,
can't
always
wait.
good.
I can't wait until your Chicago friends and family hear this. This is, I mean,
The
this is
drinks,
great.
always
I
good.
set you up for this, so you knew what was to happen. So I hope Chicago definitely disowns you, and that was the purpose of me doing that. So, but without that, without further ado, bro, I want to get into the topic of the day, bro. I'm glad to just, like I
Now you want
said,
to transition to West Coast.
of course, I can't let you get your last word in, bro. I think that's where it's got to end at. It's got to end at. You're no longer allowed in Chicago. That's where it's got to stay.
Oh,
But but I want to get into the dialogue for the day, which is checking our own biases. So I want to define bias because it has a broader definition, but the real definition is a disproportionate weight in favor or against an idea or thing, usually in a way that's closed-minded, or unfair, and it can be learned or innate. So speaking to like brain association and subconscious or unconscious thoughts formulated when we have a bias, right? So the brain's tendency is to categorize information in a way where we have it accessible, where it's not something we have to think about, right? Those unconscious triggers, those unconscious things where we can just draw from those things and we can make decisions off of those. So my question to you, Hale, is what is your initial thought that comes to mind when you hear the word bias? Like what is something that you think of when you hear that word?
and so when my personal thought when I hear bias is first bias in and of like the word itself is
Right.
neutral. So when people say bias, it's always thing that you see, hear, experience all comes together seed as a
Right.
negative. In my opinion, I always believe it to be neutral because there are good biases. But to really make it straightforward, biases are really just your perception of the world. To form your own personal bias that you use to filter throughout the world.
Right. And you're able to make decisions based off of that. And like I said, it's innate or it could, and mostly those things are learned, right? Nothing in this world, we grow up with a blank canvas, right? And so most of the things, our biases are learned from whether it's our environment or whether it's in the home. Those are the things that we pick up and then we kind of filter out the decisions in our, like that scope of the world through our lens. So I'll shift to you, Trey. Like for you, what is the word bias hold? Like what weight does that hold and what does it mean to you?
I definitely agree with Hale when he says that like biases are made by yourself and like your feelings, and I think like bias for me is more of like your feelings that automatically decide like a choice or give you an idea of something without actually being able to read it and like read into the situation or like observe what it actually is. It's like the saying like don't judge a book by its cover. I kind of associate that with being biased.
Right. And like you said, there's good and bad, and we'll get into that here in a little bit. But speaking to biases, like we formulate those things when we're young, right? Those are things, those learned behaviors, those learned tendencies that we learned in the house, whether in our community, whether in our city. We all got our own unique things depending upon our own situations. But like I said, it affects our decision making, right? And biases can limit our range of cognition in numerous ways, like how we, respond to crisis situations, problem solving, critical thinking. And it's essential to not have these things be detrimental in regards to like clouding our thought process when it's time for us to make those critical decisions in life, right? And so my question to you, Trey, is has there been a time where you felt that preconceived notion or bias in some sort of way, and has it affected your decision? And if so, in what ways had it affected your decision or the outcome of the situation?
I think that most decision that you make throughout like your day to day living are like based off of biases. They have like a sort of like bias in them. Like, and I can even tell you an instance where that's like, you can definitely tell that there's a bias is that you have like different friend groups. Like, you always have that one big friend group, and then you have smaller,
Right.
different friend groups that have like different people, or just like
Like
add one,
clicks.
drop one, and like just other people. Yeah, like cliques. And like sometimes there'll be like in the big friend group, it'll be like, all right, let's go do something. Like somebody will say it. But in those smaller
Right.
friend groups, they say like, if one person isn't going or other people aren't going, then I'm not gonna go because I don't want to be around our big friend group without the smaller pieces. And I feel like that's
Right.
something that's like a choice based off of biases that I've made
And
personally before.
for sure, and like, and then like, what I'm saying, we have biases within our friend groups as well, and a lot of the thing about men in particular us is that our friend groups are formulated quickly, right? Like our group chats are formulated
Hmm.
quickly. We become friends with men super close. It don't really, there's viral videos of men becoming friends super quick. We don't even need really a reason to become friends with guys, and
It's just a
so
common
those
interest, and you like, we
it's,
good.
yeah, it's that underlying thing. So I'll shift to you, Hell. Like, has there been a time where you felt that preconceived notion or bias has affected a decision of yours, and if so, in what way?
Yeah, kind of like what Trey was saying, and I agree with, is that it first of all, to be clear, biases are completely natural. People always make it seem like, again, that it's something wrong, it's a bad thing. It's that everyone naturally is going to be biased to a degree. The best you can do is try to be as neutral as you can, but you're always going to have some type of bias.
Right.
And personally, for me, there's a particular time is, well, growing up in Chicago, which I still root
Oh,
for
here he
Chicago,
goes.
just so we
Here
know,
he
I still
goes.
root for Chicago. But
Here he goes.
uh, so Chicago's a very liberal city, which
Right.
is not hard to figure out if you've ever been there, been around, or just understand the dynamics, right?
Right.
But it was very biased as a liberal city to where you never really got to see the other side of the argument. Now, it existed, but it wasn't a big, impressive town. There's a lot of things that we did that wasn't. So in my hometown in particular, it was a liberal, very progressive. We were years ahead of a lot of other people doing,
Right.
gender neutral bathrooms, as an example. We were very early on to adopt that before other schools and across the country started to bring that on. But going to college, went to college in a small town in Missouri.
Right.
As you imagine, it was very red. So going there and having my first college roommate couldn't have been more of an opposite human being than me, of course.
Absolutely. I know who you're speaking to
He,
too.
yeah. No, he's a cool guy, and we're friends and
Absolutely.
everything. But yeah, we have very different lifestyles, different dynamics, and everything. And the biggest thing was the fact that I came there and I was very liberal, and he was there and he was very Republican, right?
Right.
Well, my original bias coming in is that all Republicans were bad and all Republicans were wrong, right?
Right.
So I came in there obviously with a disdain to a degree, only from the sheer fact of his political views, right?
Right.
Well, you have to live with that person regardless. So as time went on, you slowly start to hear their side, you slowly start to hear their ideology, and you realize one on one, when you're able to really talk to someone, there's a lot more common ground than you would believe that there is with a person. So
Right.
through talking with him, I understand. I was like, okay, I understand why you think this way. Or, okay, I understand, actually, I would agree with that too. Like, I would swing that way in this particular situation. And as that continue, you start to change your perception and how you view the world, right? So now
Right.
he thinks, because again, I lived in a town where I have a way more balanced view, especially with politics. I always thought one side was right, and it's never like that. It's one side is sometimes right, another side is sometimes right. One side is wrong, sometimes the other side is wrong. It's all wove it all comes together and flows in its own ways. And that's definitely a good time where my my original bias definitely damaged my view of the world in a negative way. And being able to look at things and look at the world and challenge and to discuss it definitely helps me now and how I live in general.
And and we'll speak to that, in a little bit, about being challenged, right, and our biases being challenged. But in particular, what you're talking into is a little bit where we have this thing in society of being very polarizing, right? Being on one side, whether it's political, whether all these ideologies, we don't really allow that gray area, right? You got to either hold this stance or you got to hold this stance, right? So a lot of those things, in terms of polarization, happen within our society on a lot of ideological things, whether it's political, like I said, and there's moral things that, you just can't be on the fence on with racism and stuff like that. Like those should be commonalities where we all should be in agreement on things. But there's a lot of things where society pushes you to a side and makes you feel wrong if you want to have that dialogue or that gray area, or, have those conversations. But that's something that we should have. And to speak to your point, for me, and my decision making, how I bias definitely affected me growing up, right? I grew up in in an all women household. And for me, I end up going to a Catholic school. So I wouldn't say sheltered, but, growing up in North Omaha, grew up in the hood. So like I was around my people. I was around a lot of African Americans. And so I'm going to the biggest high schools. And I was always in those, honors classes and those AB classes. Those are all honors. And in a way, I kind of came in with this bias. Is all that I knew. And, and now that I look back on it, you just don't know what you don't know. Right. And so I kind of, had a prejudgment towards a lot of people in terms of, I probably shouldn't kick it with them because that's just not a bad look, or I think they're corny, or, you put all these labels on
Right.
people that when you end up growing up and you seeing, like, we got a lot of commonalities in a lot of things, but it's just the nature and nurture of the situation that you were born into, or the environment, or what society teaches is right or wrong, or like what your close friends are doing. And so for a lot of me, I kind of wish that I would have branched out in a lot of those things, especially in high school. I'm glad I got the opportunity to afterwards and see it for what it clearly is. But, biases affected a lot of my decision making, right? Like whether I'm going to hang out with this group or not because of how I'm being perceived or something like that. And so that kind of leads me into my next point, because biases affects our perspective as well. Like we talk about on this podcast all the time about keeping an open mind, right? And being willing and having this openness to seeing other perspectives and how important that is. And if we only focus on seeing the world through our lens or our, own point of view, we are missing out on the whole scope of the world, and it can hinder us from seeing the true reality of the world for what it really is. And so I use that metaphor of like focusing on the trees too much and not seeing the forest, or focusing on the forest so much that you're not seeing what the particular meticulous small details, being focused on the trees. So in life, it's a balance, right? And so I'm gonna shift to
Right.
you, Hell, again. Like, what are some pros and cons in your opinion? Because there's some good that comes out of biases, right? In relation to biases and its relations to, in regards to perspective. So, and I'm gonna shift to you, Hell. So, my question to you would be: what are some of the pros and cons, in your opinion? Because there's some good that come out of those biases, right? We talked about it a little bit earlier in relation to biases and perspective.
Yeah, so uh, let's start with the pros for sure. So, as we said before, biases are natural, right? It's a natural
Right,
thing that happens for every human, to a degree, animals for sure. So the
right,
pro of it is instinctual. So it'll protect you in a lot of situations.
right. Fight or flight.
For example, yeah, of course, it's good for initiating your fight or flight. But a good example would be you're very biased about staying out really late, like 2 a.m., 3 a.m., right? So you get into a
Right,
position where you would be out and not in your house at about 2 a.m., 3 a.m., right?
right,
And you're biased to that, so you decide not to go out. Well, in a sense, that's you protecting preservating yourself. And it wouldn't come through that bias of, well, I always hear about bad things that are happening around that time, so I just won't go this time, right?
right.
So that's definitely, and there's plenty of examples like that where there's biases that are built in to help keep you safe from not just your experiences, but what you hear about other people's experiences. And then,
Right. So
Right.
what's a con to that though?
well, a big con, and there's a great example that I'll lead up to it with that. But a big con is that it allows you to be closed minded, and to a degree, you'll shut out the world. And as an individual,
Right.
it might not be terrible for you, but as a group or as a society, it is very dangerous. And there's a lot of examples of
Right.
that. If you have a bias against a certain group of people, well, as an individual, you might feel one way, but as a society, if everyone gets behind it, it can be very bad, very detrimental to those group of people that be living near you, next to you, around, everything like that. And a clear example in today's world that I'm seeing is that people are so biased and people are so close minded to what the other person has to say that it's creating a ridiculous amount of division. And that division is leading to a lot of the problems that you're seeing now. You're seeing divisions in
Right.
relationships. We talk about birth rate declining, everything that's associated with that. We're talking about increased violence.
What's some
People
context to
can't
that
hear
though?
each other. Oh, well, yeah, of course. There's a lot more variables than just bias, of course. But
Right.
we're
Right. But
talking about
I hear you. Go
increase
ahead.
of violence. Well, yeah, we're talking about increase of violence going around. Lot of division, lot of arguing, not a lot of non-unification. And because we're not together and we're not unionized, it's a lot easier for us to get manipulated. And I think that's one of the worst things that I personally see in society as of now is that a lot of people are getting manipulated over the fact that no one's on the same accord. And no one's on the same accord because everyone has their biases and they're holding on to it so strong that they can't even hear an opposing argument, a different intellectual discussion, or anything of that nature.
And so what you really and what I'm really taking from what you're saying is and it has to, and I got this theory about what the consequences of American capitalism is, right? We got a lot of inflated egos, right? We got a lot of things where people are trying to respond rather than to hear somebody, right? You really want to just come in with an agenda. I want to say something. I don't really want to hear what you got to say back, but I'm coming in to have these, not these natural dialogues to get something figured out where we have that gray area, but just to push my narrative. And I think you speaking to that in particular, right, is that a lot of, we don't want to call it spade a spade. We're not trying to hear each other. We're not trying to have those dialogues. We think that our one way of living is the right way, right? And we all feel that way. And if you do that on an individual basis, right, that's where we are not really aligned. But in a sense, it's because we push self, right? We push self to the, with the expense of other people, right? We feel as though that we're super unique. So, and it has its goods to that as well. But a con to that is that nobody is willing to hear one of each other out, right? Because we're not,
Right.
like you said, we're not open minded enough to even have those natural and organic conversations with one another to get rid of these biases, right? And then our perception and perspective of people will stay the same, right? And it's just confirmation bias. We look for things to confirm what we already believe or want to believe about somebody instead of, in the face of, other
Actually
information
going and
being presented to
experience it.
us. And that's absolutely. And we'll get into that in a little bit, but I want to shift to you, Trey. What is a pro in your mind to a bias or a con in your mind to bias in relation to perspective?
I think like for biases, there are both pros and cons, like both of you guys have said, and I agree with some of the things that you guys have been saying. But I think for pros, I think it's more of like getting you out of bad situations, like you guys were saying, like knowing that if you're out at a certain time, like Hale said, that bad things can happen if you stay out later, or knowing that if you're going in a bad part of town or things like that, that you have to be more cautious, more careful when going in those situations. So I think that's a good bias that is like something that people have every day. But I think it's bad bias
Right.
using those situations that could be good. It also could be bad as well because you can just assume like how some people do. They assume that they're going a room full of all colored people. Say you're going in a room full of all colored people, and you're not a
Right.
colored person. You could think like, oh, I could be in danger in such situations like that, using those same context clues and biases, because it's predominantly those darker skinned people who live in the areas that we're saying you have to be more cautious and careful about. Which that's a whole problem in itself. We don't
Absolutely.
even need to talk about.
Yeah, and that has a lot of flavor, and we can get into a conversation about that later. But now you're speaking to something real, right? And especially, when we have those in our cities, right? When you live in a bigger city, that is a problem for most people, right? Especially for me, I come from a predominantly black, community with North Omaha. You live in Trey, you live in St. Louis, and then Tail being from Chicago, so we all got our neighborhoods, and with us being three young African American males, right? We can, we see the biases and the perceptions that other folks have on our communities, right? And so that's something that's prevalent, definitely in our society. But in a sense, like you said, if you push out those negative, narratives, right, they're gonna believe that, right? If they see, oh man, it's like there's a lot of crime happening in these areas, like, and they never
It's gonna
experienced
stop
it,
them
then
from good
that's the label they're gonna
experiences.
put on it,
Because
right?
you
It's gonna,
never know.
and
It
you know what
might
I'm
be
saying?
some
Like, I'm
bomb
not saying
food
that.
place.
Yeah, no, yeah, and it stops you from experiencing things for what it really is, right? We just make a lot of assumptions, but that's just how our brain is wired, to assume something so we can categorize it, so we don't have to put too much thought to it. But I want to shift to like self awareness, right? We talk, this is summer of self awareness, right? And I want to do some a little bit of internal reflection. So, like, for us, every person possesses some sort of bias, right? They hold towards a certain type of people or group of people, whether it's done intentionally or unintentionally, right? Done out of spite or ignorance. Like, every human has them. Like, if we're being honest with ourselves, and these includes the likes of prejudices, stereotyping, discrimination. It's in all these forms. It's an innate part of our brain processing, like the mechanisms to categorize these things in a way that's it processes our cognition quicker, right? So we can make quicker decisions, we can make quicker thoughts to, in these critical thinking moments. So these quicker thoughts, like I said, lead to quicker decisions. So for you guys, I want to ask, like, have you been in a situation where your perception or your preconceived notion of a group was challenged? And can you speak to that situation and the aha moment you might have had after that situation? And I want to go ahead and start with Hell with that.
Yeah, so going into college, so I've traveled. I like to think I'm pretty well traveled, especially around the country, but there's a lot of Midwest cities that I've never been to. And actually, even with Missouri, like, I never went to Missouri until I started going to college, right? So,
Right.
Jordan, you'll love this story, but
Yeah.
when I was first there as a freshman, I heard about a group of people that lived in the floor below me, and they were from Omaha, Nebraska, right?
Right.
So, being from Chicago, Illinois, whenever you hear Nebraska, obviously you're hearing cornfields, nothing, just a bunch
Right.
Right.
of
Nothing
random
out there.
small towns here and there and stuff, which isn't far from the truth. That really is Nebraska. But
You're not lying.
so I remember I went out there, met with some of them. One of them happens to be the founder of this podcast, but
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for the shout
I
out.
Yeah, so I remember they were pretty pissed off about me, about what I said, because pretty much I was making fun of their town and everything. And at one point, Jordan even asked, like, "Well, did you even go there?" And I was like, "No, I've never been there at all." Right? So
Right.
it ended up being funny because obviously me and Jordan ended up becoming really great friends, and the rest of the guys down there, who was part of that group at the time.
Right.
And I actually had or got an opportunity to go to Omaha with Jordan. So he takes me out there, 4th of July, everything. And obviously, I was completely wrong about what Omaha was. Like, it was a really great city, a
Thank you.
really great environment. There was so much stuff to do. He took me to some great places to eat, for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
There's a nice catfish
Catfish
place out
place.
there that
I knew where he was going with
still
that,
has my
man.
heart,
Cajun
for
Kitchen.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, but in all seriousness, this does speak to some biases that I've had. And the sad thing about it is that now it's great that it ended up like it did, how everyone became friends and stuff, but it really doesn't always end like that. It could have, the
Right.
whole idea of meeting you guys and all of us becoming friends could have stopped right there only because I came down there and had straight bias about where they're from without even being close to visiting the state, let alone the
Right.
city itself. And
Right.
I look back at it now because again, it's funny and
Yeah.
it's just a fun thing of how we met. But at the same time, it's a really great example is that, I should have checked my biases right there because while it worked out in a great way, it could have worked out or it could have happened in a terrible way to where we would have never been friends. We would have never been friends. All the other experiences after that moment would have never happened. And that would have
Right.
gave me a whole different perspective, a whole different set of memories of life, a lot of good times that I would have missed out on, all because of that initial bias that I had.
And I'll even speak to his aha moment for him. I remember end up taking him to this Fourth of July party, and what's so crazy is if you know Hale, he's very much to himself, right? And you could
Right.
he would be the first one to tell you that. And so what's crazy is I'm hanging out. It's a real deep party. We having a mansion party or whatever, and I'm over here like looking around. Like usually when you bring a friend up, you know you're usually close in proximity.
Yeah,
Like they around you, they don't
because
really
you
know
know where they
nobody, bro.
at. Right.
Right. So about an hour in, I remember having a conversation, bro. I'm over here. And I look to my left. I'm trying to find out where he is. I see him way across the party, bro, having a blast. We're talking to another, friend group of mine by himself, bro. And I think that was his aha moment. I kind of seen him broke out of his shell in terms of like, that's not something typical of Hell to do. And so I knew he was really enjoying
Right.
himself when it came to that. But for me, and speaking to a situation for me is that, um, especially when we talked about when we had went down to Central Missouri, right, Hell, and the friend groups that we had met, and it's way different. It was kind of like a culture shock for me, to be honest. Come from North Omaha in a predominantly black neighborhood, and go down to Warrensburg, Missouri, where they open carry, and I mean, it's just a different,
Yeah,
it's a
It's
different
a
that's
different
vibe.
eye opening.
environment.
That is
It's a,
eye opening. All right,
it's,
that's for
it's
sure.
And like he was saying, like we met a lot of like local like athletes, and we have a lot of good friends, now that came about that. But like at first, it was a super culture shock. I'm like, bro, like I'm around a lot of white people, and then you got the perception of them with, with the open carry, and being a little bit
The
country,
camo
being from
guns. Come
Missouri.
on.
Yeah, you know what I'm saying. So like, but I had to open my mind and understand that on a lot of levels, we were more alike than I would have ever thought if I hadn't opened my mind to even receiving them in a way, right? And I think a good thing where it challenges your perceptions and like where something for me was challenged is that a segue for me was having football, right? I think football is a great sport where it's an equalizer, right? It don't matter where you come
Right.
from, your family situation or nothing, right? Make the best people play, right? And that's white, black,
Hmm.
any race for that matter. And so I think that was a good icebreaker for me. And then to learn about, white people in the sense of actually seeing who they are and allowing them to see who I am and where I come from, the grace that I would have never gave them beforehand, right? If I'm being honest, like I had to give that grace and understand, that I had to be open to hearing them out as well. Not on just like the societal topics that we talk about when it comes to like the bad things with race, but just seeing how they move culturally, right? And a lot
Right.
of my preconceived notions, some things, got some factuality, but at the end of the day, I learned that we had a lot in common. And if I hadn't opened my mind and if football had not been there for me to have that gateway to even having those friendships, I probably would have had those same things that I would have carried with me throughout life to where I wouldn't even be as close with a lot of white friends that I have now. And so to see them in a different light and especially in that setting for me was like a aha moment for me just in terms of my whole life. So I'll go to you, Trey. Have you had like a situation where you had a preconceived notion of a group that was challenged?
I could definitely say, just like you guys, it was experiences that definitely changed how I thought of stuff. And
Right.
mine isn't more of like blacks versus white, different environments like that, because just because I've been a part of all of them my whole life, basically, just because I have a biracial family. Mine is
Right.
more of just exploring and being able to be open to the experience of going out and like going to places where you may only know one person or two people and you just go out and just start talking to people and just being able to be around everybody. And I think a lot of biases have stopped people from being able to just go to a bar with you and your one friend, or just go to a bar by yourself, or go, it doesn't even have to be a bar, a park, just anywhere that just people hang out and do stuff. Like just being able to go there
Right.
by yourself and being open to talking to anybody and not having a bias at all really changed how I thought of everything, and how like I'm not afraid to go out anywhere and then just go have an experience and just go talk to random people and just be opening. And I've learned definitely since I've been working like in the hospital, everybody talks to everybody. And if you're open and start talking to people, you never know whose day you'll make and like what different experiences you'll have with by checking your biases.
Absolutely, and you segue into what I want to speak about. How like, and I quickly want to get to this right, and I want to be brief with this in terms of like how can we get rid of our biases or keep them in check. And for me, a thing that's near and dear to me, and I think it's the number one thing for anybody to do is educate yourself. Right, 99% of our perceptions, whether it's stereotyping or prejudice, stem from ignorance or a lack of knowledge about a certain group of people. Right, we just don't
Right.
have that knowledge. We just are take what we're told, or we take a piece of information and we kind of roll with that. Right, that's what the whole we put that on the whole group, and that's just what our brain is wired to do. So
Hmm.
go in with an open mind to see the reality of people, like who people are and what they truly are
Yeah.
about, with a
Definitely being
genuine
open to
vested interest.
experiences.
Right, like with a genuine invested like interest though. Like you don't want to go into these things where you coming in trying to okay, I think I know this about them and trying to figure out like that confirmation, right? Like trying to validate what you already believe, right? Try to go on with the most open mind to see what it really is. And even if it's not for you, or it got some validity to what you already heard, you'll be more adapt to knowing that willingness and openness, right, is you'll learn something from that, right? Putting yourself in different situations to learn what different groups of people are truly about. And that just don't even have to go to a race, gender, religion. Like we have more commonalities than we like to give each other credit for having. So I
Right.
would say educate yourself, and like you can go find people, you can go find these things. It's not like it's a secret book to this. Like go put yourself in these situations where you are educating yourself about these people that you might have a bias to, and most of the people are receptive to being open to receiving you, and we don't give enough people that credit. So I'll shift to you, Trey. What is one thing briefly that you would say that can keep our biases in check or get rid of a certain bias? What piece of advice would you have?
Definitely for mine, I would say the same thing I've been preaching throughout this whole podcast is just being open to the experience, like never writing anything off. Like, so what if you've never done something before or never been around people? There's things like that. Just be open to experience because you never know what you're missing out on. And just like you said, you don't know what you don't know. So just always being
Absolutely.
open to an experience will definitely help check all the biases that you have, or at least most of them.
That openness and willingness, right? Like I said, you're
Hmm.
not going to always be receptive to everything, right? We understand that. But you don't know what you don't know, right? And if you don't know something, like if at least you being open and willing to doing it, at least you know that I have a chance of changing my mind or growing in my mindset with something I might have believed beforehand, and it might be able to change. Because most likely it will, right? We are mostly
Right.
ignorant on a lot of things that we're not around. So that openness and willingness that we've been preaching the whole podcast, and we continue to preach because it's super, super important, will help you grow in a lot of areas in your mindset. So I'll shift to you, Hell. What is a brief, you know, thought for you or a piece of advice of getting rid of a bias or keeping our biases in check?
I think the most important thing the best way to combat being biased is to understand when
Right.
you are, you can do revolves around critical thinking. So when you're talking about a bias, are being biased. So whenever you're approaching a situation, you're always going to start thinking in your head. You're always going to start with scenarios of like, okay, this could happen. This is going to have. This is what I want and stuff. It's always nice to take a second and think like, wait a minute, am I being biased? And what I'm already thinking on how this situation is going to go. Kind of like what Trey said. If you're walking into a room with a bunch of people you don't know, right? Let's say it's a bunch of people who don't look like you or any type of situation. Obviously, there's a certain thought process that's going to come through your head. Take a second and think to yourself, like, wait a minute, am I being biased? Is
Absolutely.
is how I'm thinking right now, is this opening, kind of like what Trey said? Or is there some type of lack of knowledge do I have of a certain situation that I'm getting myself into, as Jordan's talking about? So to tie it all together, it's the idea is to take a second and think about what your plan of action is before you start doing it. Because if you just react, then 9 times out of 10, you're going to react based off of your own bias. If you take a second to think
Absolutely.
about it, you'll eliminate a fair amount of the bias that you have up front and allow you to be open-minded. It'll allow you to learn. It'll allow you to try new things. Everything will build on itself through there.
Absolutely, absolutely. Like I said, that openness and willingness, that self-awareness that Hale was talking about, with that, with it being the overall concept, is super, super important. So with that being said, I want to wrap this episode up. It was a good episode for us, and we would like to thank you guys for tuning into this episode of Modeling Empowered Narratives podcast. You can find us on IG. Make sure to follow us for our updated content and any additional information. You can follow us at _men the podcast. At _men the podcast, and you can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well. Obviously, this recording is going on YouTube, so make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel when this is up. This was a successful episode for us, but I'll end it with that.